All right, 42 days of Keto Chow, day 12. Even dozen. Um, so everything's going great still. Not really much to report. My ketones are, well, they were 3.2 yet, day before yesterday. Yesterday they were 3.3, so it's about holding steady. Um, so I went to the dentist yesterday and got a crown. It was actually kind of nice to have Keto Chow because I wouldn't have been able to eat anything anyway most of the day because my jaw still hurt up until this morning. And I get to go back because there's a high spot on the crown. And so, yeah, whatever. Um, but yeah, and this morning I woke up early. Everybody else all the kids have the day off school. And so I woke up at about, I don't know, 6, which is late for me usually. But I mixed up a bunch of batches of Keto Chow 2.1 with different flavors to get me through the rest of part of the rest of the experiment. I'll have to do it again. But I did mix up chicken soup flavor, which still warm, still salty. Um, anyway, I did that mostly because my wife still hasn't had a chance to try the chicken soup flavor that didn't suck. The people that we're having do the manufacturing, they have a better source on colors, natural colors and whatnot. And so we've been having them do different tests with the colors, and they kept on sending us ones with the color to test. But it also had sucralose in it, which we would mix it up, and then we would taste it and be like, that doesn't taste right. It's salty and sweet at the same time, but really sweet, and it was weird. So I made this myself. It doesn't have the coloring in it, but it does have everything else correct and tastes great. So, in case you're wondering, to make the chicken soup, it's almost exactly the same as making regular Keto Chow. You just use hot water instead of cold. So for this morning, I just put in the fat, in this case, grapeseed oil. Well, I put in a little bit of water first to keep the oil from sticking to the bottom. I don't know if that helps or not, but whatever. Then I put in the oil, then I put in the powder, and then I had my faucet turned on as hot as it would go, which we have our water heater turned up pretty hot because a lot of people want to take showers in the mornings, and if you want any semblance of a warm shower, you have to have the water heater up really hot. So yeah, it comes out really hot, scalding hot, and I just filled it up, shook it. Normally I tell people to wait 30 minutes before drinking the Keto Chow. With 2.1, because I changed the form of selenium, that's no longer really an issue. You can drink it immediately if you really want to, though it does dissolve stuff better if you leave it. And with hot water, it dissolves almost immediately. And a lot of people think that it doesn't taste as salty when they've let it sit for 30 minutes or longer. But with the savory flavor, you want it to be salty. So, yeah, whatever. Anyway, and then I just stuck it in my backpack, came to work, and have been drinking it ever since. And today, I like to use these videos just to kind of talk about stuff until I get invited on more podcasts. It's my outlet, but just to give you guys a really brief, as much as possible, history on how I got started with complete foods, nutritionally complete foods. For lack of a better term, usually it's referred to as Soylent. I'll get into that in just a second. So way back in 2013, there was an Ars Technica story about a company named Soylent. And at first I thought it was a joke. I was like, hey, that's pretty funny. They did not a Kickstarter, a crowdsourced campaign. I thought that they were just doing it as a joke. And turns out it was a real thing. But yeah, it was a computer engineer who got tired of cooking all of his food and just wanted to just have something really simple that he could just eat and get back to work. And so they did some coverage of it. The Soylent guys, well, they didn't know how to do any of this, and no one else had done anything like this, really. People always say, well, how is this different from Ensure? Well, Ensure is full of sugar. It'd be more like the food that they give to coma patients through an IV, or that they feed them through a tube, because it's designed to be nutritionally complete. It's not just a snack, it's full food with all the nutrients that you need in order to survive. Well, so he messed up on some stuff, ended up with some vitamin deficiencies, and then they were revising their product. Ars Technica did a further coverage, but the kind of the repeating theme was that they didn't have it ready. The crowdfunding thing had been funded, but they kept on having a delay. Oh well, we wanted this rice flour from China, but it was the wrong one, and so we're having a delay. And it really intrigued me, but delay after delay after delay, I never did. I never have actually bought Soylent before. They right around December, Lee Hutchinson of Ars Technica did another story about Soylent, talking about the new delay, because they had just posted to their blog saying, hey, here's another delay. And I'm like, you know what? This is dumb. They had actually started a do-it-yourself site where people were trading recipes and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna try this. So I think it was January 3rd. No, it was January 1st, because I decided I was going to go make my own stuff using one of the recipes there. And it was on January 1st because everything was closed. I remember that. I tried to go around to the different stores here in town, and nothing was open. So instead, I ordered the stuff off of Amazon. I created a Reddit account and started posting and talking to people about the different recipes out there. And I went with one called People Chow, if that sounds familiar. People Chow before that was named Bachelor Chow. And Bachelor Chow is a fake product from the TV show Futurama, where there's it's a product that you can get. It's everything a bachelor needs in order to survive. And it comes in a dog food bag, and you eat it out of a bowl like cereal, like dog chow. And in the TV show Futurama, they're advertising that the new version now with flavor, because I guess the original one didn't have flavor. Anyway, so a guy had made a recipe called Bachelor Chow, and then he made it into People Chow, because with Soylent, if you've seen the movie Soylent Green, there's at the very end, Charlton Heston is screaming out, "Soylent Green is people." Sorry, spoiler. And so on the whole Soylent do-it-yourself, you get really tired of every time someone hears about Soylent, they're all, oh, Soylent Green is people. It's like, that's a joke I've never heard before. It's like with the last name Bear. I've never heard those jokes before either. Anyway, back to the point. So he changed the name of it to People Chow as a kind of an homage to Soylent Green is people. And it was based off of corn masa, the stuff that you make tamales with, and corn chips. Anyway, so I tried that recipe. It had a bunch of almond flour in it. The very first version that I tried, version 2.3. And that was only out for a week until the guy, Max K, in case you're wondering, changed the recipe in order to have no more almond flour, more corn flour, a bunch of other things changed. And I made that. I started mixing it for myself starting in January. And by the time June came around, I was pretty active, talking to other people about the recipe. And I had made some tweaks to the recipe myself. A lot of people didn't want to make the recipe themselves. Or they wanted to make the recipe, they just didn't want to buy the $200 or $300 worth of supplies in order to test it out. they wanted to sample it. And so um, people on Reddit were like, hey, well, can you just send me a sample? And I'm like, okay. And so I would just grab a scoop from my big thing of the stuff and put it in a bag and mail it off. And it got to the point where there were enough people asking me for samples. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to. I had a blog running on WordPress, and where I was talking about it, and you can still see all those posts. And it got to the point where people, yeah, I was like, I should just sell these, make it easier for people, make it easier for me. And so there's a very simple e-commerce platform called WooCommerce that plugs into um, WordPress. Sorry, there's people talking outside my office, and so it's distracting. Um, and so it was very easy to set up. I didn't even have a secure site with a SSL certificate because all the payments were done through PayPal, and I just didn't even care, and it was just all fine. And then people were still ordering. They wanted to order an entire week's worth. So I started mixing up. They would place an order for a week. I would mix it up and send it out. It would be in two 1-gallon bags that I would double bag. And I would send those out. You can see pictures of those on my blog as well. And that just kind of grew a little bit up until it was in October when of 2014 when I went to Dreamforce, the computer conference. And during Dreamforce, well, that was kind of the snapping point. I had heard about ketogenic diets before, but I'd never really studied it. I didn't know much about it. Didn't know what low carb was. In fact, there's a really great post, I should find it somewhere, where a guy asks, are you going to do a lower carbohydrate version of People Chow? And I thoroughly dismissed him out of hand with like, no, that's just stupid stuff. You know, my parents did Atkins and it was dumb. And this, because People Chow is very high in carbohydrates. The number one ingredient is corn masa, which is carbohydrates. It does have some, it used olive oil, the version that I made, because canola oil wasn't good. The original version actually used soybean oil because that had vitamin K. But then I found out that vitamin K gets destroyed by ultraviolet light, like the fluorescent lights that are in grocery stores. So if you were trying to use soybean oil for vitamin K and the oil had been out in just sitting on a store shelf for longer than like an hour, all of the vitamin K was gone. And so I was using a vitamin K supplement in conjunction with olive oil, but you can read about that on my blog if you really want to. And so, yeah, I hadn't done any research really into the ketogenic diet, but I gained enough weight on that trip. And the week before that, I had gone on a nighttime photography trip with my dad, helping him take photos. So I was like, you know what, this needs to change. I need to do something. So I found it was the highest rated keto recipe out there. It was called Keto Food, and it was made by a guy who he had made a couple of other recipes, but he didn't know anything about ketogenic diets. He just knew what people were saying about them. So it didn't have the right amount of electrolytes. It used an insane amount of ground chia seeds for the omega-3s in conjunction with coconut flour and raw cocoa powder. And yeah, and then you took a vitamin. And I mean, he actually had two recipes. One of them was completely unnecessary, the induction phase recipe, which was harkening back to the Atkins diet induction phase, which is a ketogenic diet is what it is. And then on Atkins, you slowly ramp up the carbs. But on keto, you stay in induction phase. But the induction phase of this guy's recipe was extremely low carb and awful, absolutely awful. I got through maybe 4 days of it and jumped right into the ongoing ketosis recipe, which it was still awful. It just had less chia seeds, but it tasted like someone had taken an almond joy taken all the sugar out of it and run it through a blender and added a bunch of extra coconut flour. I mean, to say it was gritty is an understatement. I would literally hold my nose, drink it as fast as I could, and then drink a whole bunch of water. Just because it was, and I couldn't drink it very fast because there was so much coconut flour, and it would just hit my stomach, and it was awful. So, yeah. Then, if you're familiar with keto soy, the guy who's making that sent me a sample of it because I was making keto food. And Ted and I still get along great. But he sent me a sample of it. I tried it, and I was like, it was still gritty. It wasn't as gritty as the keto food, and it tastes significantly better. It was like night and day. And I was like, whoa, this can actually taste good. And then there's, off the top of my, what is his name? Kenneth's. Kenneth's was, I don't remember his full name, but his name's Ken, and he goes by Ken UFS. Anyway, he had a recipe that he was making that used heavy whipping cream as the primary fat source. And it still had coconut flour and a bunch of other gritty things in it. But I tried that, and I mixed up some of that myself, and I was like, whoa, this is really good. So I adapted the recipe, made a bunch of changes, and on January 1st, 2015, a year after I had started my Soylent journey, I posted for the first time about Keto Chow. Because I had been making people chow. I was still actually mixing up people chow and sending it to people. That would continue until May or June, because I had a lot of people who had subscriptions to get people chow, and I didn't want to screw them over. So I continued making it, and that's okay. But then I gave them like a month or two warning that says, okay, I'm going to stop. In fact, it's going to be when I go on vacation, so you wouldn't be getting it anyway, because we went on a 2-week vacation, which was great, to Oregon to see the redwoods. So I was still making people chow, and so I'd used a bunch of the ingredients from people chow to make keto chow because I already had them. And that was how keto chow was born. So, and that's how I got started with the nutritionally complete stuff, and that's why the recipe for people chow, that original recipe, is still up and available. If you want to use it, you want to buy the ingredients and make it yourself, have at it. Because that'd be a kind of a jerk thing to do, to take that down. But yeah, the new recipes for Keto Chow 2.1 and whatnot. Warm and savory. Those are still posted, but they're completely useless to anyone except for me, simply because in order to make them, you have to have industrial scale machinery, and you have to have industrial scale ingredients. You have to, I actually have on the recipe page. If you ask, how do I make this? My first response will be, go and buy, I think it's 500 kilos of vitamin powder, which used to be enough to make, it's several years. I think it was 42 years worth. In Keto Chow 2.1, I've taken the magnesium and the choline out of the vitamin powder, and I'm just adding those separately. So the vitamin powder went from like 10 grams a meal down to, 375 milligrams or something like that. No, okay, it was 10 grams a day. Went from 10 grams a day down to 975 milligrams. So that's a big change. And so to buy 500 kilograms of the vitamin powder would probably last a single person, it's like 100 years or something like that. It's an insane amount, and it would cost you so much money. It's more than a car. So you probably don't want to try to make Keto Chow 2.1 yourself. I guess you could reverse engineer it if you really wanted to, but you're honestly better off just buying the base powder, which is everything that goes into Keto Chow minus the protein, flavoring, and sweetener. So you can add those yourself if you want to. Or just use the Keto Chow 1.5 recipe that I have up on the website. It's still good. I sold that. And people were making it for, it was like a year in and of itself. So great recipe. But yeah, the new flavors and all that other stuff, the ongoing product development with Keto Chow 2.1 does kind of leave it in the dust, but the original stuff is still there. So anyway, I need to leave so I can go to the dentist to get my crown taken care of. So I'll upload this video and hopefully it'll all be done. Well, it might even be done before I get back. It shouldn't take them very long. Anyway, see you on day 13.